Okay, so today I want to talk about how unpredictable making money in real estate is in the beginning. So here are my expenses. So expenses 2026. I spent about $100 a month on my direct mail campaign. So I spent about $100 a month on direct mail. So that's envelopes, stamps, um, paper to print on, ink. I spent about $100. Let's say 100 to 150 a month. So that would be that's just direct mail. So we won't do the. I was going to do the annual expense. I was going to take this expense and do it annually, but I have more expenses. So I have a $150 annual business tax, franchise tax. Um, just call it business tax. So the $150 annual business tax for my LLC. You don't really need a LLC when you start, but you'll need one eventually. And in the beginning, when you're a local wholesaler like me or a local investor like myself, getting your business name out there, especially if you're going to use your LLC as your brand as well, getting your business name out there and familiar with the scene, it's very prudent. So I got $150 annual business tax. I also pay $120 per month for a PO box. Okay, so after watching this video back, I realized that I said that I spend $120 per month for my PO box. Actually, I just spend $120 a year. So this per month, that slash month there, ignore that. It really should be slash annual. So I spent $120 annually for my PO box. So I made a mistake there. Sorry about that. So continue the video. Um, I have a PO box because I do not want any mail with my personal address on there. So with my direct mail campaign, when I'm sending out my mailers, I put a PO box there for the return address if I have any returns. I don't put my personal address there because you want to keep your personal address private. But I know some investors that put their personal address on their direct mail campaign on their envelopes. But it's a personal preference type of thing. I don't want my personal address to be out there. So I'm spending that $120 per month on a PO box. And what else am I spending? I'm probably spending about um, a full tank of gas going out every weekend and driving through neighborhoods. So a full tank of gas for me would be about $40 per month extra because I use my personal vehicle as my business vehicle as well. So $40 a month driving through neighborhoods looking for houses. So I do this every Saturday and Sunday. I drive through the city in different neighborhoods, and I tell you more about what particular neighborhoods I drive through for the purposes of finding motivated sellers in my course, which is located in the description. So if you want to know how I find deals, look in the description. Um, so I spend about $40 on a tank of gas. So that's 400 miles for me. I drive 400 miles every month. So that's 100 miles every weekend. driving through neighborhoods, back and forth through the same neighborhoods. Sometimes I try to hit new neighborhoods every weekend. But eventually, I ride through those neighborhoods on repeat. Every neighborhood I go through, I go back through it. Because those are my what the real estate agents call them. Those are my farms. So I'm driving my farms and looking at them and making sure there's nothing changed. So I spend about $40 a month on that. And what else do I spend money on? That's about it. $100 a month on direct mail. Yeah, so that is about it. Gas, yeah, yeah, that's about it. So where are we at? We are at let's just say 150. So 150. So that's 300. I'm adding all these up. So direct mail and annual. Okay, so this is 150. Um, okay, that's 10, 3, 0, 5, 1. So that's $1,800 a year. And then it's 18 plus 150 plus 120 and plus 40. Okay, so also after going through the video, I realized that for my $40 that I spend every month on gas driving through neighborhoods, when I did my math over here, when I calculated the annual expense of my direct mail campaign, which was 1,800 right there, and then I added the 150 for the business tax, the franchise tax, and then the 120 for the annual fee for the PO box, I added $40 as an annual expense for me driving through neighborhoods, when really that number should be 480, which would be one, and then that's 5, 9, 10, 11, and then this is 10, 1, 2, right? Yeah, so 5, 9, 10, 11, 8, 9, 10, 11. Oh, geez. Okay, so this is actually 1, and then 1, 2. So 21, 21, 10. So this is how much I spend every year marketing. So sending mail, my whole direct mail campaign cost me $2,100 every year. So this is how much I spend every year. Right now, there have been years where I've spent, I think the most I've spent in a year on marketing is about 5K. So about 5K, the most. But this year, I'm trying to spend just $2,100 on marketing. I'm kind of challenging myself, and I've made plenty of money over the last 9 years of me being a real estate investor. I've made plenty of money just on $2,000 and below every year on marketing. But I'm trying to challenge myself because last year and the year before last, I was spending. I think last year I was spending about. So this is 2025 expenses. I was spending about $300 per month on direct mail, and it was fine. I got more. I got more calls. I got more calls here. Um, I saw more houses, and I made a little bit of money last year. Um, the reason why I'm trying to decrease this number, I'm trying to decrease it, is because it's all relative. It's all relative. I thought about years ago, like I can remember years in 2017 when I first started, 2018, 2019, and then I think in 2020, during these years, I wasn't spending. Some of these years I was spending more, some years less, but through a good stretch here, through these years, from 2017 to 2019, I think I was spending no more than $100 per month on direct mail for all of these years here. And I remember that very clearly, because all I had was $100 extra per month to spend. Um, so I was spending this, and then when I got to 2020, I started making some money here doing these years. I made tens of thousands of dollars doing these years, and then when I got to 2020, um, I spent more because of the pandemic and all of that. I spent more during 2020 to 2020, like two or something like that. I spent a little bit more during these years. I think I was spending close to $300 a month, like I was in 2025. So this, I was spending $300 per month here during these years. And then when I got to 2023, I went back down to like 200 or 150 per month. Because, I was thinking like I'm thinking now. I was like, man, it really doesn't matter how much I spend. Um, it's all relative. You can spend a lesser amount 1 year on marketing and you'll get some deals. You'll get some deals. And if you spend more, you'll get more deals. But the way I do my direct mail now, I think the big thing that helped me out during all of these years here was that when I first started in real estate investing, I was really, really um, adamant about finding the right people, targeting the right people. Um, and see, I didn't know it at the time when I began because it was really a mix. I was really adamant at the beginning when I started investing in real estate about targeting the right people. So those are people who are behind on their taxes, facing foreclosure, um, people who just got divorced and recently divorced, and people who died. I was really paying attention to those people during these years, but I also was going kind of crazy during these years because I was a beginner. I was a beginner, so I was going kind of crazy during these years as well, and I was targeting people who didn't really have a need to sell. So those people would be landlords who have owned their properties for less than 10 years. I was targeting a lot of people because I thought that I was under the impression that if I spend more on my marketing, I'll get more back. But what I didn't realize was, and so this is what I did during these years from 2020 to 2022. I started spending more because I was like, oh, if I spend more, um, spend more, get more. So I had this type of thinking. I was like, okay, I'm gonna spend more and I'm gonna get more. But in order for me to spend more, um, I had to send to people who were less likely to sell their homes, because when I was looking at the people who, during these years here, when I was looking at people who really needed to sell, like people who died and divorced or behind on their taxes and all that, you had to really look. You can get a list from PropStream and ListSource. You can get lists out there of people who they think are going through these situations, and for the pre foreclosures, it's hard to get those wrong because that information is public. I mean, all this information is public, but uh, to catch people who are behind on their taxes, you have to go to the county records to find that information out, as far as I know. Um, but to really hone in on the people who need to sell, their homes, you really had to study. You really had to study. You can get your list from List Source or PropStream, or platforms like PropStream and List Source. But you still have to go through your list that you get and make sure that none of these properties have sold, or anything like that, because some of these properties, they say they have sold. You get the list, so you pay the money for PropStream, or you pay the money for the list, with List Source, and you get the list, and they give you a whole bunch of names. And a lot of these people don't understand. See, I would imagine there are people who get these lists and just start mailing to these lists. But I started going through these, each individual name on these lists. And I started realizing, like, wow, a big majority of these people have recently purchased these properties within the last 10 years. And then a big majority of them have sold their properties. Not that big of a majority of people have sold their properties recently. But there's some people on there on these lists that have sold their properties. And PropStream and ListSource and these platforms like PropStream and ListSource, they give you these lists, and you under the impression that you have a whole list of people that you can send, mail to, even if you put in your criteria that you only want to target people who have owned their property for more than 10 years. There'll still be some properties on there, of homeowners or landlords who have owned their properties for less than 10 years, because a property can change hands in different ways. Quick claims and affidavits, and there's different ways people can transfer their property to a new owner. So I guess my point is, when you get a list from PropStream or ListSource, you still have to go through and scrutinize each individual property to make sure that you have to make a criteria. You have to make yourself a criteria that you will only buy properties in this type of situation, more than 10 years. You have to make sure you set yourself like a criteria for people that you will send mail to. And you also want to make sure that these people have the greatest chance of selling. And you can find out how I do that in the description. Get the course, and you can find out how I do that. But my point is, I had to, because you have to scrutinize those lists, it takes time. So you have to sit in your office or wherever you are and go through these lists and make sure that these people are people that you need to send mail to. And see, I was doing that during these years here, 2017 to 2019. I was doing that a lot because I didn't want to lose money. I didn't have a lot of money to work with. So I was doing that a lot. I was really scrutinizing those lists of people. And then when I ride around town and look at properties as well, I was really scrutinizing that list as well. So I didn't need to spend a lot of money because my dollars were more potent. They were, I was spending less money, but I was reaching people who were more targeted. Rather than here, I was spending more money doing these years. I was spending more money on marketing, and I could have started spending more money. But in order to do this, I couldn't sit around in order to raise my marketing budget to this price here, to 300 from 100. I had to do some extra stuff. I had to start sending mail to more people than the people that I was going through and really looking at for my targeting, the people that really needed to receive my mail. Those were the people who I was paying a lot of attention to. So it was using a lot of my time. But in order to raise my budget, I had to send mail to another list or group of people who I couldn't really scrutinize and look at that much into. So I started downloading these lists from PropStream and ListSource, and I was just sending mail to this list, just so I can have a higher budget per month. I don't know why I was thinking like that. Because that's how you think though. You think if you spend more, then you'll make more. You spend more on marketing, you'll make more, but you need to be more targeted. That's the real goal. So now in 2026 now, I'm more targeted now. That's why I'm spending this much money right now. Now I haven't, other than that landlord's house that I did a walkthrough of, I haven't received any calls on any other properties yet. And that's kind of scary, because I'm used to getting a property every month. I'm used to getting properties coming in every month. And the way I do direct mail, I could go back to that, because my list, like once you go through your list, like I was saying that you could download from list source or prop stream. Once you go through that list is curated for your mailing campaign, and you don't have to look into that list anymore. So I may, I'm trying to challenge myself to stay around this number. I'm trying to spend the least amount. But I could spend more money on marketing this year. I could raise it back to 300, and I might do it because I can. I can do whatever I want. So I could raise it back to this, because I can spend another $150 per month on my list, my curated list, my landlord list that I've already went through and checked. So these are lists that I've already went through and checked to make sure that the people still own them. They've owned them for more than 10 years. And then my other criteria that I talk about in my course. So I have a big list. I think I have thousands of names on my list. I call it my main list. And there's like thousands of names on there of people who I've looked at, all into their information. I've looked at them, found out everything there is to know about these people, and I send my mail to them on the regular. So every year I send them mail. And that list is already curated. It's color coded for me. It has everything I need to just send them mail on autopilot. And there are websites out there or companies out there that can send your mail for you to this list. Like you can provide them with a list and they can just send mail for you. But I don't use those businesses, those websites or businesses. I don't use them because it will take away from my personalized direct mail campaign. And I may come off as a person who really likes to be in control of my situation, and I'm, to be honest, I am like that. I really like to be in control of what's going on, and that can be a fault of mine, because it requires me to spend a lot of my time, because I care so much about my direct mail campaign. It requires me to spend most of my time doing this when I should be trying to delegate this stuff out to someone else, to another company or whatever. But it takes away your personality when you send it to these other people, these other websites or businesses that I have researched about. I haven't researched about them in depth, but I know these companies, these websites online websites that will send mail for you. And I think Vistaprint will send mail for you as well. You just have to send them your list and they'll send postcards out for you on autopilot. You could just let them do it. But I refuse to let them do it. And, I may do it at some point, once I'm not able to spend as much time on my direct mail campaign as I would like to. I will have to take my curated list and give it to Vistaprint or whatever company to send the mail out for me. But you have to pay them for that. You have to pay them for that. That's another expense, and I'm kind of cheap. I don't want to pay for that when really, I really would be multiplying my money if I did that. If I did pay to get Vistaprint to mail for me, because then I can take my time and put it into something else that can make more money. But I'm kind of failing at that. I'm really bad at delegating, because I want because the type of person I am, I want to own everything. I want to own everything. I want to see everything myself, and that can be a strength in some situations, and a weakness in other situations. So who knows what it is for me? I could be making more money every year if I would learn to delegate or learn to let my baby go and grow up and go out into the world. But it's hard for me to do that. But I could be spending more and spending that money on these curated lists here, lists that I don't have to scrutinize. I don't have to look through. I've already looked through them, and it's thousands of names. But I send mail to this list within this budget right here. So this budget has my curated list and then new homeowners or landlords I want to send mail to. So new homeowners. So I'm trying to make this budget work. I'm trying to make this work for me every month because I'm trying to, because I know that this works because I did it throughout these years here. So I did it throughout these years. I made $100 per. I was spending $100 a month on marketing. So I was about to say I made $100 per month. Make me tens of thousands of dollars in these years. These years here. I made a lot of my money doing it during this time. I made over like six figures. I haven't counted, and that may be a sad thing to admit, but I have not counted how much money I've made. But I have counted. I have counted. I rounded it because I looked through my tax returns and seen what I reported every year, and I reported all my income through all of these years. Every year I report all my income. I don't try to hide nothing from nobody because I'm not afraid of anything. So I did a round. I just rounded it off, and it was like 102,000, 106,000, or something like that. It was something like that. That's what I made in during my real estate investing career. So from 2017 to now, well, it doesn't count. So that's just from 2017 to 2024, I believe. So I made six figures from 2017 to 2024. I haven't counted what I made in 2025 to 2026 yet. Haven't made anything in 2026 yet. Looking. Market is kind of rough. The market is kind of rough. But see, people got to get used to spending 6% interest on these mortgages. These 30-year mortgages at 6%, people will have to get used to it. And then the market will go back up. It'll get back active. Because it's up. It's up too much, according to a lot of people. But it'll get back active once people start accepting this, because 2 to 3% interest rates, we won't see them for a long time. We won't see those for a long time. This is the new normal. They said 4% will be ideal. Boy, if interest rates get down to, if a 30-year mortgage gets down to this 4%, affordability with housing will be, oh, shoot, did I spell that right, man? I'm terrible at spelling, bro. Terrible at spelling. Mortgage, whatever. But if they said if interest rates get down to this, houses would be really affordable. But who knows when they will get down to this? People have to start getting used to 6% right now because they was up to 8. So this is really good. But I made six figures doing this time range right here. And I did a majority. Like I was saying before, I made a majority of my money doing these years because I was new and I was just fearless and I was just out there just doing it. I was just out there just doing whatever. And my expenses were $100 per month on marketing. Everything else was just me spending, just me spending the money that I was making, but as far as like how much I was putting into real estate and getting back, this was all I was putting in, $100 per month. And that would include gas. That would include gas. I didn't have a PO box at the time during these years. I was just using my personal address. So that would include gas and bro, I was spending $100 a month. And you would think like there's no way that he would do that. But some of these years, like in 2017, I made over $10,000. It was over $10,000 in 2017. And look at that, I spent $1,200 for the year and made this. And then 2018, I probably made, I don't even know, 20, I don't know what I made in 2018, 20,000 something, I don't know, 15,000, $20,000 for the year. Now, these are not big numbers, bro. These are not big numbers. Now, I was doing this part time, so I had my full time gig, which was really nothing as well. But I was just doing this for fun. I was just doing this on the side. And that's kind of how you have to do it, because the point of the video today is about unpredictability of real estate investing when you're starting like I'm starting, unless you're a real estate agent and you're just fully into real estate and you have being a real estate agent as your main job and then being an investor as your side gig. That would be a person who is fully into real estate, or if you're a contractor, or if you're a mortgage person or something working at a bank or whatever. But I guess that the bank would be your main job. But my point is, with investing, you have to do it on the side first. Unless you just already have the money to get into buying a rental, because you can buy you some rentals. Because that's the point. We're investing. We're willing and dealing in real estate so we can make money, or you can do it in your business, whatever your business is. But we're trying to get money so we can buy rentals, so we can have income to do this full time, to do the real estate. If you like doing real estate like I do, we want rentals so we can do real estate like this all the time, full time. Because it's unpredictable. The money that you make is unpredictable when you don't have rentals, when you don't have another stream of income coming in. Because I didn't know what I was going to make during these years. I didn't know what I was going to make. Some years I made hardly nothing, but some years, I made a good amount. You never really know what you're going to make in real estate. And that's what I like about it. I think that's my intrigue. That's why I'm so intrigued about doing this, because my wife told me a long time ago that I should quit, because some of these years I wasn't making anything hardly, especially during these pandemic years. But you know what? I was making some pretty good money during these pandemic years still, because my list, I really scrutinized my list and I have this criteria that I stick to. So I was still making money during these years. 2022 was okay. It wasn't the best. I think this may have been the year that my wife was like, man, maybe you should do something else. Because it was a small amount. Maybe I made $5,000 or $10,000 during this year, and my wife was like, hey, maybe you should quit. But what people don't understand is, you are investing in your education when you're doing this. If you want to keep doing this, you are investing in your education. So just because I didn't make any money this year in 2022, hardly, $5,000, $10,000, because I was wholesaling and bird dogging, just because I didn't make any money this year, that does not mean when 2032 comes, I'm not going to make probably $600,000 that year. You know what? You know what I mean? See, people fail to see your future, but you're the only one that can see what is going to become of you. You're the only one who can believe in it. So, in 2022, I probably made $5,000 in 2022. But that does not mean that I should quit, because every year you're doing this, you're learning. Every year you do something, you learn more about it. And especially if you're intrigued about it or you're interested in it, I think you should play off your interest. Whatever you're interested in, do it, and see can you make some money from it. I'm not talking about hobbies or anything like that. You're interested in your different hobbies. Like I'm interested in chess and tennis and, a lot of things that I'm interested in, drawing, painting, I'm interested in those things, but I know that the probability of me making money in those things is low. But see, here in real estate, I recognize that I'm really interested in it, and the probability of me making a lot of money in it is high. So that's why I'm so intrigued by it, because you don't know what you're going to make, whatever year it is. I don't know what I'm gonna make in 2026 this year. I don't know what I'm going to make. You just have to do the work. You have to do the work, and you have to be smart about it. But like I said, like, just because I didn't make hardly any money in 2022, and I could have quit during that time because maybe I got discouraged. Maybe I would have gotten discouraged and said, "Oh man, this doesn't really work." Instead of looking at it like you're in school and you're an intern and you're just learning, like you're getting ready to become a doctor, but you got to do your residency in different hospitals until you're ready. And then when you're ready, you can start making this amount of money. A lot of, see, people don't see that. I see that. I see that for my future, in 2026, 2027, I can make this much money. You can make this much money right now. You can make this much. And I think people don't realize that. One year, one year, I got a call from a guy, and he was a landlord. I think he had about 8 houses. I think he had about 8 houses. And each of these houses had different rent. He was getting different rent from each of these houses. And so some of them were renting for 1,500 a month, some were renting for 1,000, some were renting for 900, and then he had one that was renting for like 2,500. So he had this like eclectic group of portfolio of houses that he wanted to sell. So he wanted to sell all of these houses for about, you know what? He did not want to sell all of the houses. I'm sorry. He didn't want to sell all of the houses. He wanted to sell one. He wanted to sell me one of his houses for like, I think he wanted like 150,000 for this house. But during this conversation with him, he told me that he had 7 other houses that he wanted to get rid of because he had a son that was getting ready to graduate. And he said that once his son graduates high school, him, his wife, and his son were going to move to another state. So he wanted to get rid of all of his rentals here. So, he told me that, and I said, well, would you be interested in selling all of your houses? Would you sell the whole portfolio to one person? And he said, yeah, I would be. He said, what do you have in mind? So I hung up on him. Well, I didn't hang up on him, but we got off the phone, and I went through each of his houses on the county records. I went through each one of them, and I realized that all of his houses were worth about $1 million. So his houses were worth about $1 million. And then I calculated what an investor would have to spend on this portfolio to capitalize on this $1 million. So I realized that anywhere between 600,000 to 700,000 would be a good deal for an investor. So an investor would spend this, either one of these amounts, and they would get either 400 in equity here or 300 in equity here. So equity. So if you spend 700 in this scenario, you would have this in equity. If you spend 600 on these properties, on this portfolio, you would have 400,000 in equity. And then you would have the rental income also that's coming in from these properties as well. And I think I had that figured in as well into these numbers here. It was more than enough. The rental income was more than enough to justify getting like probably a 20 to 30% return on this portfolio. So he had there was enough. If we would have bought, I think at this price, if you would have bought his portfolio at 600,000, you would have 30% coming in rent. So you would be getting 30% a 30% return in rent here. And with the 700, if you would have bought it at 700,000, it would have been a 20% return. Both of these are great returns. And then, on top of that, in most cases, if an investor would have, because we ended up not buying this portfolio from this guy, the investor that I tagged to take this on, he was ready. He was ready, and he was really excited about buying it at this price, 600,000. But like I was just getting ready to say before, these would go up exponentially if you get debt. So if you would get a loan, so this would go up crazy. But ideally, this investor, this cash buyer that I tagged to take this on, he was going to get actually he was going to get a HELOC on his other portfolio, because this investor that I tagged to possibly buy this portfolio, he has like 50 or 60 other properties, and he was going to get a HELOC. I think he said he was going to use some cash as well. He was going to use a combination of his cash and a HELOC on his other properties to pay for this portfolio. Because I think he said he was going to sell some properties to make up for his cash and his HELOC. But to get the money right now that he needed, he was going to use a HELOC and some cash. But so I went back to the seller with this price in mind. I went back to the seller and I told him, I said, man, we can give you $600,000 right now today, if you sell us your portfolio. Would you take it? And he was like, that's a good price. That would work. He was interested. I can tell that he was interested. He was like, that would work. But he was like, at the end of the conversation, he was like, I got to think on it. I got to talk to the wife. I got to think on it. And so, he was about to get out the phone, and I told him, I said, man, if you want us to negotiate, we can. So if you have a counter, we're interested. We're interested in a counter, because I think we would have went up to 700,000. We would have went up to 700,000, and I was going to make either between 75K to $100,000 as an on a assignment fee. So I was going to wholesale this property, this portfolio. It's not a property, it's a portfolio. So this is what I was going to make. You see that? 75,000, $100,000. And this is like one of those random years. This was like maybe 2020 or 2021 or somewhere along, or maybe 2019. It was in those years where I was spending $100 a month on expenses, but I got something like this that came across my desk, and I almost made this that year. The guy never contacted me back, and I sent him some mail, some follow-up mail, a couple times. I even called him again. And when I called him back, he said, we still haven't decided. Our son is still in school, but he's getting out in a couple months, and I'll give you a call. He said he was going to give me a call back, and he never called me back. And now that I'm thinking about it, I think I need to call this guy back. Now that I'm thinking about this deal, I need to call this guy back. And see, that's another problem. You have to set up systems to where you can remember to reach back out to these sellers in these situations. You have to be able to set you up a system. I use my phone most of the time. Sometimes I miss things like this. I'm missing this right now. This guy probably sold his portfolio to someone else because I failed to follow up. You don't want to let that happen to you. That's another thing that you can't really teach that. I guess you can teach it, but it's something that you have to like pick up along the way. Once you realize that you're missing out on this much money, you'll be like, okay, you hit yourself in the head and be like, okay, set you an alarm, man. Even if it's 2 years out, set you an alarm on February the 25th, 2029 to contact this guy and see if he's still interested in selling his house. You have to do that. So look, I was going to make either $75,000 at one time or 100K. And where I am in the part of the United States, this is a lot of money. This is a lot of money, bro. This is a lot of money. But see, that's what I'm saying. That's what I mean by unpredictability. You don't know what you're going to make in any year, doing this. The only predictable thing is having another source of income coming in while you're doing this. But like I was saying before, if I would have quit in 2022 because I had people around me telling me, "Oh man, you're not making that much money. You're making $5,000, $10,000 in a year. That's not that much money." If I would have listened to these people, these naysayers, these people, these negative people, I would have never ran into this deal. If I would have quit, if those negative people, because I had people being negative during my whole time in real estate. Every year, people's like, "Oh man, you're not making that much. You're not making that much." But what if I would have made this one year? This amount of money here, $75 to $100,000. At that time, this would have grown my business exponentially. This would have taken me to another level. This amount of money would have took me to another level. It would take me to where I am now. This would have taken me to where I am now, to where I'm able to buy a property if I wanted to, and fix it up and get into that part of real estate investing, which is flipping and rentals and being a landlord and all that. This would have taken me to another level. So, money is like a time machine. It in this business, it's a time machine. Well, I guess it's in any business. Money is a time machine in this business in particular. This would have taken me to another level if I would have made this. Even though I didn't make the money, I'm not looking at it like, "Oh man, I didn't make it. This really doesn't work." No, I almost made this. This was like the probability of me making this was because the seller was interested. He didn't just hang up on me and say, "No, I want my $1,000,000. No, I want $1 million." Are you crazy? He didn't know what his properties were worth. And most of the time you'll run into sellers like that. They don't know what their properties are worth. The probability of me making this was probably a 7 out of 10. That was my probability of making this much money. So will this happen again? Yeah. Will this number right here go up? This 7? Will this go up because I've learned something from this experience? Yes. Your skill level increases year after year. Your skill level will increase every year. So if I come across this again, I'll do something differently, because I will remember this, in my mind. I will remember this deal and do something differently. Maybe I'll talk to the seller more. Maybe I'll follow up better, maybe we'll come up on price. Maybe instead of 600,000, we should have offered him 750. Maybe next time I'll offer 750. Oh, sorry, not 7%, 750%. Maybe I'll offer 750 instead of 700,000. Maybe we'll do this, go up here and get this going and just lock it in, because it was a great deal. We could have sold this whole portfolio for 900,000 if we wanted to sell it at a bargain to quickly get rid of it. We could have sold it for 900,000. If we would have offered 750, we could have sold it for 900,000. That would be 0, 5, 10. So 150. Yeah. So 10, 8, 1. Yeah. So we would have made 150K. I probably would have been modest and took 20K out of this as a finder's fee. The cash buyer would have made 130 grand. You know what I'm saying? Closing costs and all that. If somebody buying a portfolio like this, is most likely going to be another investor. They're going to buy the portfolio, and maybe they're going to, most likely they're going to, if they get a good deal like this, where we're leaving them $100,000 in equity in the deal. We leaving them net in the deal, so they got $100,000 in there. The day of, and my cash buyer is making 130, just on a regular day. Just getting a call from me and being, he gets he. So if this would have worked, this cash buyer would have made 130K that day just off of a call from me. Just knowing me, and I would have made 20K. Not that much as he made, but look, you gotta play. You gotta know your position. You gotta know your position, bro. You gotta know your position. You playing the middleman. As a wholesaler, you the middleman. The middleman. So this person right here, your cash buyer, is taking all the risk. He or she is buying the property. They're buying the whole thing and taking on all the risk. There could be some issues there. There could be some issues there. They're taking all the risks, so it's only right for them to make the most of the money, them and the sellers, what I'm saying? I guess at the end of the day, the seller is it's only right. No one gets angry if the seller is making a lot of money. As buyers, we're happy to take away $100,000 or $20,000. You know, just going into the deal and managing it. Basically, the seller is making the decision to sell and get and make everybody money. They're making the decision, so it's all up to them. So it's only right if they get a lot of money, no one is angry. Because them making a decision. So them, sometimes I think faster. I talk faster than I think. So the seller making the decision to sell, it makes us money. It puts money in our pocket as well. So you have to know your position, bro. You have to know your position. This is how a lot of wholesalers fail, man. I would imagine. I don't know. I'm not the Census Bureau. I don't know. Not playing your position where you are in your investing career. Look at this difference. You look at this difference. People would be outraged. Some people would be outraged. Oh, how you making? How the cash buyer come in, and they're just writing a check, and they're making 130,000. I'm just making 20. You would think that you are getting pennies here. You're getting pennies. But you didn't have to do nothing, bro. You didn't have to do hardly nothing. Your position is valuable. Don't get me wrong. Your position as a wholesaler or a bird dogger for that matter. These positions are very valuable. They make this whole thing work. You're a piece, you're the centerpiece of the puzzle. Without you, there wouldn't be a picture. You should be rewarded, but you have to get rewarded based on, it has to be relative to your part in the deal. You were the person that the seller talked to first. You negotiated it. You got the property under contract. You made, like in this case, like I made the decision to ask this seller to sell his entire portfolio. I went through each property and figured out that the portfolio was worth about $1 million. And then I made the decision to offer him 600,000. And mind you, I'm still kind of new. I'm a couple years in, and I'm like offering these big numbers because I realized, after a couple years, it's all numbers. Don't be afraid of these big numbers, 600,000, $1 million. All this crap is you'll learn from other investors as well. These numbers, they're just that. They're just numbers. Don't be afraid of these big numbers or offering these big numbers. So I went back and offered this guy I said, we'll take the entire portfolio for 600 grand today, and we'll pay for your closing costs as well. And he was just, when I hit him with that, I don't know if it's rare that people get offered that much money, like, in that way. I'm sure people, around the nation, but in the area that I'm in, I would imagine that it's kind of rare that these homeowners, these sellers get offered this much. They put their property up for sale, and they know, and they're expecting to get that much when they put their property up for sale. But out of nowhere, just out of the blue, like, You talking to a guy, like in this case, this seller was just talking to a guy, me, and I just offered him 600,000. I kind of convinced him to sell his whole portfolio, and I was just like, What if you sell the whole the portfolio? Would you do it?" And he was like, Yeah, I guess I would. Everything is for sale, right?" That's what the guy said, and I was like, "Okay." And I, did my calculations, called him back. "I'll give you $600,000 for it right now, today." And he paused for a minute. I would imagine, people just aren't used to that. Even though they have properties and they're worth a certain amount, when you buying properties, you're really not coming out a lot on cash, on your own cash. These properties, they go up in value, and people don't really look at equity like it's cash. They just think of it like, it's just something that's just out there, and you hear about it, and you like it or whatever, but it's not cash money in your pocket. And some people just think that about equity, but it's really cash, bro. It's really, it's an asset, and that's the value of that's the money that's in the asset. If you sell it, you can get that money out of it. You can get that equity out of it, and it can turn into cash. People don't look at equity like it's cash. It's cash, bro. It's cash. But like I'm saying, I'm young. Well, I'm young in the sense of my experience level in real estate, and I'm throwing these numbers. It's all a numbers game. It's all numbers, but you have to know your role. You know what I'm saying? You have to know where you fit in. And like I was explaining a little bit earlier, I put everything together, but I did not take on the risk associated with buying a property or a portfolio in this situation. There's risks that come with writing that check and putting your name on that check, signing it, and saying, I'll take everything. I'll take the properties. There's risk. You're the owner now, so you're taking on a lot of responsibility. You're taking on everything. Not only easements and all that, you're also taking on things that are attached to the property, like liens and things like that. You definitely want to get some title insurance when you're buying properties. But there could be some things that's hidden. They don't really catch everything. But if they don't catch everything, that's why you got title insurance. So you can, if something does come up during your ownership of the property, you can call title insurance, and they'll try to handle it. But things can come up. Things can come up, bro. And so they're taking on all the risks. So it's only right for them. They're the second person in the deal that deserves the most money. First is the seller. First is the seller. I'm trying to think of where to write this. So the seller, then the buyer, the end buyer, and then you, as far as like who gets the most money. You are last. You're not taking hardly any risk. You're just getting money, and you're walking away with that 20K. Whether or not this cash buyer makes actually, if everything sells and everybody walks away from the closing table with their checks, then the deal is done. But sometimes you'll run into cash buyers who would like to pay you. They're so happy with your work, they would like to pay you your cut early. Now, are those cash buyers smart? Not really. And will you run into cash buyers like that a lot? No. Usually you will only get paid after they close on the property. But sometimes you'll have these investors who will give you the check, and you would be smart to just hold that check. If they do give you this money before the deal closes, you will be smart to hold that check and not spend it until the deal closes. You would be smart to do that. Would be very prudent of you, because if this deal does not close, the cash buyer is going to ask for their 20 grand back, or whatever they gave you before the closing. They're going to ask for that back, and you better have it to give it to them. Okay. This is a business, bro. This is a business. Your reputation is a business. Your reputation is the product. You want to make sure that you get some good reviews on your reputation. Okay, so but look, this is where you fall right here. This doesn't mean you're not important. You're still in the big three. You know what I'm saying? You're still in the big three, but you just get paid the least amount because of your role. One day you'll be here, And one day you'll be here. One day you'll be in all of these positions. One day you'll be in all these positions and you'll understand this ladder. You'll understand you'll understand that. But anyway, making money in real estate when you start out, it's unpredictable. And even, as you go on, if you're going to have a career in flipping and restoration of properties, renovation of properties, and all that, the income is unpredictable because you're going to go through another situation like where we're in right now in the markets, where we have high interest rates. So there's not a lot of people selling properties, and there's not a lot of people buying properties right now. Houses are sitting on the market for longer, because buyers are they're able to be picky now. So you're going to go through these ups and downs, these valleys and peaks, these expansions and recessions in the real estate market. And you have to be able to adapt to that. You have to find some kind of strategy that works so you can stay in the business. Because one day, my overarching point is, there's going to be an opportunity that comes that's going to change your life. There's going to be opportunities like these right here that will change your life. This opportunity just popped across my desk because I never gave up. I kept going. I'm still going to this day because I know that things like this can happen. This is what keeps me going. You know what I'm saying? Because one day you can be making nothing for 4 years, nothing, $1,000, maybe you net $1,000 one year, and then you net $2,000 the next year. And then the next year, maybe you net 10,000. That fourth year, you may run into a situation like this and net 100,000 or $600,000. You may net that because you have more experience. You got your money. You saving your money. The experience is the main thing. So you don't know what you're going to make. You could make this in a year, one of these years. You probably was making. You probably went. You probably was going on 4 or 5 years, and you was making $50,000, $60,000 every year in real estate, and then one year you end up getting this big whale. I call this is a whale. This is a colossal blue whale from where I am right now in my investing career. $1 million, making $1 million in a year unexpectedly, that would be a colossal plus in my business for most people. So that's why I stick to it, because I know that this can happen. One of these years, this can happen, and then it's over. You know what I'm saying? Then my life has changed. It has changed. With the little bit of money I've been making every year for the last 9 years, it has changed for the better. Just making that. So that's all I want to talk about today is the unpredictability of real estate, and how you should never give up. You should just keep going, because you'll run into situations like this. So don't listen to the naysayers. Just keep going. Believe in yourself. Don't fall victim to these negative people, because people are so negative these days. Well, people have always been negative, but these days with social media, kind of messing with people's brains, and them wanting to make more money to satisfy these obsessions they have. Some people have, this whole thing with social media is driving people crazy these days, because they're looking at people living these different lives, and they're like, dang, why aren't I making why am I not making $100,000 a month? I should be, because you got people on YouTube telling you you're nothing if you're not making $100,000 a month. They're trying to motivate you, but at the same time, for people who don't recognize that they're motivating you, these people will get depressed. They be like, oh man, why am I not making $100,000 a year? Why I can't buy that car or that house or whatever? Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm just a failure. Some people hit that rock bottom and they get out of it, and they realize, like, okay, I need to work on me. I need to really step it up in my business, whatever, even if I don't have that business yet, I need to step it up and start a business or do something to better my situation. And then some people will be like, oh man, it'll never work out for me. So, you know, you have to be careful. People are really negative these days, because you have that person that felt like that will feel like that, like there's nothing out there for me to do or nothing out there in the world for me. They'll get around other people and be negative, and then they'll turn that person negative. It's contagious, right? It's contagious. Being negative is contagious. Contagious. Being positive is not contagious for some reason. It is for other positive people, but it's rare that everyone, is positive, takes on a positive type of life or thinking, based on, one person walking in the room. If there's one person walking in the room and there's 10 people in that room, if that one person coming in will make, that one person will make it 11 people in the room total. That one person walking in, if that person is a negative person, that person will make probably 9 out of 10 people in this room negative. Well, 9 out of 11, including that person. Well, that person is negative too. So it'll be two people. There will be 10 people in there negative. One person probably, holding their own, trying to be positive. But if there was one positive person that was walking into this room of 10 people, there will end up being 10 people who are still negative and just a couple I mean, not 10 people, but it'll probably be one or two people in there who are positive, who can catch that positive vibe from that positive person that's walking in. So there'll be probably just two people in there positive, and the rest of them will be negative, because that's just how it works. The probabilities, chances, and what have you, percentages. That's just how it works. Look at the news and everything else. Everything is negative on the news. They're talking about real estate and how real estate is just terrible. Everything is so high and all that. I'm looking at that, but it's having no effect on me. I'm reading about it. I'm reading about it and just studying what they're saying. But it's not having an effect on me. I'm not about to quit real estate because interest rates are high. I'm sticking in it so I can keep learning. And then when things get favorable, or if they don't, I'm still going to figure out a way to make money in it. So, that's all I want to say today. I hope you have a great day. And, if you're thinking about getting in real estate, get the course. It's in the description. That's step one. And then you can get in contact with me after that. But I'll talk to you later.